Duck fans probably had to like that last night, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Thinking about them.
Watching your enemy not just get beat, but kind of like manhandled a little bit. That probably feels pretty good.
And then watching Penix limp off, holding his side.
Look, I'll say this about both sides. I found both teams to be very likable and respectful. I thought there was a lot of respect. I didn't think there was a lot of trash going on. After the game, Penix, walking in, I saw a couple Michigan guys come over and wrap their arms around him. Even up on the podium when they were talking to some of the Michigan guys, there was multiple guys that were like, hey, that's a hell of a football team over there. We knew it sort of challenged. So I actually found both teams fairly easy to root for.
I kind of got a hint of this is fun watching Penix just get pummeled.
Yeah.
I got a hint of that vibe late in the game that I'm sure Duck fans got because I felt like he was kind of playing it up.
You think?
I know he's hurt. There's no question.
Yeah.
But I think he also is one of those guys that wants everyone to know it. Like, I mean, just the slow limp off of the field with the holding the side with the towel over the,
The towel over the head might have been a bit much.
Dude, Penix, we get it. You got your ass kicked. But I just, I go back to the Oregon game, the first one, where Oregon was the one that roughed him up. They're the ones that got those ribs.
Yeah, the ones that broke him.
And that was in the second half of that game. And Oregon in the second half of that game really got to Penix.
Yeah.
And they hurt him.
Yep.
So I kept thinking about that game going, my God, like he is a totally different quarterback when you warm him up.
Yep.
And you hit him. He's just completely different. But then I went back to that first Oregon game and went, God, they did that to him. But he had the one freaking drive where it was 2 plays or 3 plays or whatever.
Down to a
passes.
Yep.
And that was it.
Thanks for coming.
Now, Nix did his part and
got him down for a field goal.
got him down for a field goal. They missed it. But still, I just go back thinking like, man, he is so different when he gets hit. Oregon did that, and he still drove them down for the game, ultimately the game-winning score. Mm-hmm. That stings.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, he wasn't right in the second half of that game. And,
and he wasn't.
You had him in the same spot Michigan had him in. They finished it, and Oregon didn't.
Yeah, and you saw Oregon had a good defense. Michigan had a great defense. They just did. Michigan's defense was as advertised, and we kept...
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Penix is what makes Washington go.
And they neutralized
him. And he is totally different when he gets hit.
Yeah.
And Oregon did that to him, and they still didn't beat him. Almost, but they didn't get him.
Yep.
And that's got to be frustrating.
It hurts twice.
Those
right?
DBs probably got to be thinking about that, going, God.
Well, and that's what I said.
1 or 2 plays.
As good as Oregon's defense was, and it's good defense. It wasn't Michigan's. That defense, and we said it all year long, I wanted to see it against some real offenses because they didn't play any all year. Ohio State had an okay offense, and even Bama's. Like, Bama's offense was good. It wasn't great. Washington had a great offense, and Michigan took care of it. So, look, the idea that Michigan is some sort of all-time team is laughable to me. I just don't think there's the top-end talent that you have there with some of those Bama, Georgias. I think the LSU team with Joe Burrow, I think they murdered this Michigan team. But in this year, it was absolute bully ball. And I kind of appreciate that you can win ugly. This was the first time we've seen a team in modern college football win with just this style. This was old school, like Nick Saban, early LSU. Like, it doesn't matter who our quarterback is. We're just going to beat you up, and we're going to run the ball and play old school football. Alabama had to evolve from that because it wasn't working anymore. And yet Michigan did it without top 3, without top 4 recruiting classes. And I think that's good for the sport. I think it's nice that someone other than one of the top 4 or 5 recruiters managed to do that. And I appreciate the level of commitment. Jim Harbaugh a couple years ago was on the verge of getting fired. And I don't care.
I know, that's wild, isn't it?
Yeah,
think about all the talk about how he just wasn't the right guy and it's time to move on. It's just, there's a lesson in there.
Yes, and it was a slow build. It took a while, and a lot of those guys from Michigan came back. And yeah, I hate when they're like, oh, Corum came back. Well, of course he did. He wasn't going to be a first-round pick. It's like we talk about this all the time, like, oh, he's choosing to come back. Is he? Or did the NFL just look at you and be like, dude, we're not that interested? So, but yeah, it was a group of seniors. It was a group of people that were seniors and juniors that had been through some of the rough times. So you may not like Harbaugh, and I don't, and some of the the stuff that goes along with Michigan and it's self-inflicted, but all their adversity. But I do appreciate where they came from the last and taking their lumps, losing to Georgia, losing to TCU, not being able to get over the hump against Ohio State, and just slowly building it into this bully ball that then goes perfect and wins a national title. I think it's a good story.
It was a nice W. I think they got somewhat lucky in the matchup because we knew that they could run it down Washington's throats. Yeah. We knew that. And that would not have been the case against say, Georgia.
Probably not.
So in that instance, it's like you always say styles make fights. Well, the Washington-Texas game, the style made that fight, and that was a tough one for Texas because their back end of their defense wasn't as good. And Washington, obviously, their passing game is their team. But this one, and we kind of tried to talk ourselves into Penix and those receivers are so great. The offensive line held up against Texas, so they'll hold up against Michigan. We tried to do all that, but we kind of ignored the fact that everybody knew, including Michigan, that they could run it down Washington's throat, and they did that right out of the gate. Yeah. I mean, all I have to do is tell you, say you didn't watch the game, and I'll tell you that the final box score says 38 carries, 303 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Ball game.
Done. You say Washington does not win that game.
Nope.
And they didn't. They lost by 21 points.
And in the first quarter, they had runs of 41, 46, and 59. I could tell you that. But again, I want to give credit to UW because they fixed it. And for 2+ quarters, they played good defense and they held Michigan down, which is what UW has done all year. The defense isn't great, but it finds ways to keep in games, and then it's up to the offense, and the offense didn't do it. And I will go to my grave saying that if they play that game 10 times, Washington can win 3 or 4 of those. And I go back to the overthrow on the first field goal, the miss to Adunze down the sidelines, which was a walk-in touchdown. I'll go to the holding call, which it's pretty ticky-tacky, but I understand why they threw it. The one that took back the Adunze 40+ yard completion when it was a 7-point game completely changed the outlook of that. There were so many of those plays that it didn't work, which are... It's easy to come up here and say, well, coulda, woulda, shoulda. But if 1 or 2 of those goes the other way, that's a game in the final 4 or 5 minutes as opposed to the back break.
I mean, it kind of was anyway.
Yeah, but Washington they ran. You can't ask the defense to hold up that entire time. The offense at some point has to do something to bail out your defense. It was like early on, the defense is just getting bloody, and the defense is like, okay, we've rallied, we've held. Offense, hold up your end of the bargain. And it's the one time this year that the offense wasn't able to do it. Yeah. And I give all the credit in the world to Michigan. I still think that on a different day, that Washington offense can do enough to make that a final play, sort of like what we saw against Alabama, where it comes down to the final play. But you're right in that the better team last night, top to bottom, and the better team the majority of time they play is going to be Michigan. And I think we all knew that going into the game.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like those misses on some of those plays is because the other team is in their brain.
Sure.
And that won't change. There's a reason why there were so many misses.
I guess
they're not. In other words, I don't think they're actually self-inflicted wounds.
Sure.
Yes, of course, there's a wide open receiver, but the reason he didn't hit the wide open receiver is because the defensive line was up his ass.
And I guess I'm disappointed if I'm a Washington fan, and you can't be mad at him because he's the reason why you're there. I guess I'm just disappointed if I'm a UW fan with the way he handled it against Texas, where he was under just as much pressure versus the way he handled it against Michigan. And yeah, the Michigan back end of the defense is better, and it's an overall better defense, but to be so great in the pocket and so great under pressure and so great in manipulating things one week and to look completely lost. I mean, think about this. Even if he plays a C+ to B- game, let's say B-, I don't know about C+, but B- to a solid B, they're in that game till the end. And he played an A+ game against Texas.
Don't you think?
That's I don't know. In the biggest stage, you need your Heisman Trophy guy.
Well, yeah.
To be the hero.
Of course, but I discredit Michigan. Don't you think that Texas has got to be kicking themselves watching that?
Yeah.
They're like, well, wait a minute, what? what's the difference?
Back half of the defense.
But yeah, and I think that's what it is. I think when Penix is in the Texas game, Penix saw wide open guys.
Yep.
They were right in frent of him.
Yep.
Pitch and catch.
And Michigan was better.
Michigan,
they were sticky.
they were much stickier. They were some of those throws, and I haven't heard anybody say this. Although of course I haven't listened to a lot of post game. But I did not think the Washington receivers did him any favors. There were a lot of drop balls, and those guys are supposed to be the best receiving core in the country. There were a few times I can think of 2 or 3 where he put it right on the money in a tight window, and the guy freaking dropped it.
Washington has been, all year been the best 50-50 ball team in the country, where tight window. Let's go up. Adunze, no one's better, but McMillan, Polk, all those guys, Westover, they have been phenomenal at making big catches. And again, maybe at stage just being too big for him and it was just an off night, but you are 100% right that those 50-50 balls, God, did they make maybe 1 or 2 of those all game long? So yes, that's I can put a lot of this on Penix, but you are right that his receivers did him no favors last night. Especially when your quarterback isn't playing great. Sometimes when you're an NFL guy, you've got to make plays to get him going in rhythm, and the receivers never did. And then I'll give credit to Michigan because even on a lot of those third down plays and second down to try to make up a lot of yardage, where it looked like the yak was going to be there was an ankle tackle. The number of one-on-one open field tackles that Michigan made was outstanding. That should be a cut up DVD for every football coach in the country, every young football team, and says, you want to play defense, this is how you play it.
Yeah. All right. We'll wrap up the championship game, Michigan, Washington, and the fact that Jim Harbaugh is a low-key Oregon hero, Oregon Duck hero.